At dinner, my mom smiled and said, "Some grandkids just make you proud." She looked straight at my sister's kids. My son asked quietly, "Not me?" I pulled him close and said, "You're perfect." Then I looked up and added, "And from now on, perfect won't be funding this house." My dad started screaming. Last Tuesday, my 7-year-old son Micah looked me in the eye and said, "Mama, am I not a good grandkid?" And I swear something inside me that had been bending for years just snapped clean through. But let me back up because you need to understand how we got to that dinner table, and why those words from a child's mouth were the thing that finally made me stop writing checks and start writing boundaries. My name is Jolene. I'm 34, I live in Dayton, Ohio, and for most of my adult life I have been the family ATM. Not the favorite daughter. Oh no, never that, just the reliable one. The one who picks up the phone. The one who sends money when the furnace breaks. The one who drives 2 hours on a Sunday to fix what nobody else will fix. You know the type? Maybe you are the type. And if you are, then honey, buckle up because this story is going to hit close to home. My parents, Donna and Richard, had me and my younger sister Bree. Now Bree, I love her, I need to say that up front. Bree is 3 years younger than me and she left Ohio 6 years ago to take a logistics job in Charlotte, North Carolina. Good for her. Seriously. She got out. She built something. Meanwhile, I stayed local because somebody had to, right? Somebody had to be nearby when mom called at 11 at night saying the roof was leaking, or when dad needed a ride to his cardiology appointments because he refused to take an Uber like a normal person. And I did it all. I did it with a smile. I did it while raising Micah by myself after his father, Troy, decided fatherhood wasn't really his speed when Micah was 2. So picture this. Single mom working full-time as an office manager at a dental practice, and also basically functioning as a live-in support system for 2 people who never once said, "Jolene, you're doing a great job." Not once. You think I'm exaggerating? I wish I was. Here's what my typical month looked like. I paid half their mortgage. Half. Because dad's pension wasn't stretching and mom's part-time cashier job at Kroger barely covered groceries. I bought their medications. I drove over every weekend to clean, cook meals for the week, mow the lawn in summer, shovel the driveway in winter. I replaced their dishwasher last March. I paid to have their bathroom retiled because mom slipped and I was terrified she'd fall again. Do you want to know what I got in return? I got criticized. I got told the tile color was wrong. I got told the food I cooked was fine, I guess. I got told Micah was too loud when he played in their living room. But did I stop? No. Because I told myself, and you've probably told yourself the same thing, they're my parents. They're getting older. This is what family does. Right? Wrong. But I didn't know that yet. Now here's where things start to shift. Bree called me in September and told me she was moving back to Ohio. Her company was restructuring, she'd taken a severance package and she figured she'd come home, stay at mom and dad's for a couple months while she figured out her next move. She had no kids, no partner at the time, just herself and her savings. And I was genuinely happy. I thought, finally, someone else in the family will see what I see. Someone else will help carry this. Maybe with Bree around the weight gets lighter. What I didn't expect was that Bree's return would be the thing that blew the lid off everything. Because Bree hadn't been around for the daily reality in years. She'd visited for holidays, sure, but holidays are performance. Everyone's on their best behavior at Thanksgiving. You don't see the rot when the turkey's on the table. Bree moved into her old room in October. Within the first week she called me and said, "Joe, what is happening in this house?" And I just laughed. Like a real laugh because finally, someone else could see it. She told me dad had asked her for $300 on her second day there. Just casually. Like he was asking her to pass the salt. "Hey Bree B, can you spot me 300? Your sister usually handles things but she's been slow this month." Slow. I had paid their electric bill 4 days earlier. I was slow. That phone call was the beginning of something. I didn't know it yet. But you will. And honestly, what happened at that dinner a few weeks later, the one I started telling you about, that was just the spark. What came after was the fire. So let me take you to that dinner. It was a Sunday in late October. I drove over with Micah after church like I always did. I'd brought a pot roast, made it from scratch that morning, by the way, woke up at 6 to get it in the oven. We walked in and the house smelled like mom had been baking. She'd made cookies, which fine sweet, except I noticed she'd made them specifically because our cousin Tanya was bringing her kids over too. Tanya's my mom's niece's daughter. She's got 2 girls, Harper and Elise, ages 9 and 6. Cute kids. This isn't about them. We all sat down to eat. 7 of us around that table. Me, Micah, mom, dad, Bree and Tanya with her girls. And for a while everything was fine. Normal. Dad complained about the Bengals. Tanya talked about her girls' school play. Micah was being his usual sweet, quiet self, He's not a rowdy kid, never has been, he just sits and listens and sometimes asks these incredibly thoughtful questions that make you forget he's 7. Then dessert came out. Mom brought the cookies and started handing them around. And she looked at Harper and Elise and said, with this huge, warm smile, the kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at my son in years, she said, "Some grandkids just make you proud." She said it casually, like it was just a nice thing to say. But then she looked right at Tanya's girls when she said it. Not at Micah. Through Micah. Like he was furniture. And Micah, my boy, my quiet, observant, too smart for his own good boy, looked up at me with those big brown eyes and whispered, "Not me." The table went silent. Not because everyone heard him, I think only I did and maybe Bree, who was sitting on his other side. But it went silent because of what I did next. I put my arm around Micah, pulled him close, kissed the top of his head and said loud enough for the whole table, "You are perfect. You hear me? You are absolutely perfect." And then I looked at my mother. And then I looked at my father. And I said, "And from now on, perfect won't be funding this house." You could have heard a pin drop. For about 2 seconds. And then my dad, Richard, a man who has never missed an opportunity to make a situation worse, stood up from his chair and started screaming. Not talking loud. Screaming. "You ungrateful little." And I'm not going to repeat what he called me because you can probably imagine, and also because my son was sitting right there. Bree stood up too. She put her hand on my shoulder and looked at Dad and said, "Sit down, Richard." He called him Richard. Not Dad. That detail matters and you'll understand why later. I grabbed Micah's jacket, took his hand and we walked out. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't clear my plate. I didn't wrap up the leftover pot roast that I had woken up at 6 in the morning to make. I just left. And in the car, Micah looked at me and said, "Are we still going to Grandma's next Sunday?" And I said, "No, baby. I don't think we are." I cried the whole drive home. Not because I was sad. Well, partly because I was sad, but because I was furious at myself for letting it go on so long. How many little moments like that had Micah absorbed without telling me? How many times had my mother made him feel like he was less than? And I'd been so busy being the good daughter that I didn't protect my own son. That's the part that wrecked me. That's the part that still wrecks me when I think about it. Do you think I should have said something sooner? Because I think about that every single day. But walking out of that house was just the beginning. Because what happened in the weeks after, what Bree and I did and what my parents did in response, honestly I couldn't have predicted any of it. The thing about cutting off the money is that it doesn't just change your bank account. It changes every single relationship attached to it. And some of those changes, they get ugly before they get anywhere close to better. My phone started blowing up before I even got Mike into bed that night. But I'm going to tell you about that and about the moment my own father said something so cruel that both Bree and I had the exact same reaction at the exact same time. And no, I'm not going to tell you what it was yet because you need to hear how we got there. Just know that it was a moment I never imagined I'd have with my own parent. And it changed everything. So stay with me because this story is far from over. So after I left that dinner, my phone started going off before I even got Micah's shoes off at home. But it wasn't Mom or Dad calling. It was Tanya. My cousin who'd been sitting right there watching the whole thing. She left a voicemail saying, "Jolene, I'm so sorry. Harper asked me in the car why Grandma Donna was mean to Micah." A 9-year-old caught what my own mother refuses to see. Let that sink in. I texted back, "Thank you," turned my phone off and ate cereal out of the box on my couch like the dignified adult woman I am. I didn't want to think about the fact that I'd just declared financial war on my parents over a plate of cookies. Except it wasn't about the cookies. You know that. It was about years. Monday I went to work, smiled at patients, filed insurance claims and cried in my Honda Civic during lunch for 15 minutes. Then I went back inside and scheduled a root canal for a man named Gerald. Life goes on, right? That afternoon, Bree called me whispering from her bedroom at Mom and Dad's. She said, "Joe, it's been a circus. Mom won't stop talking about how you embarrassed her in front of Tanya. Dad's sulking in the garage. And neither of them has mentioned what Mom said about Micah. It's like it didn't happen. But the offense doesn't exist if they don't acknowledge it. Have you ever dealt with people like that? Where they hurt you and then act like you're the problem for reacting? That was my parents my entire life. Every confrontation ended the same. Me apologizing for being upset, them accepting my apology like they were doing me a favor. Bree asked, "What's your plan?" I said, "I'm stopping everything. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, medications, all of it." She was quiet for a second then said, "Good. It's about time. I want to be honest. This wasn't some empowering movie moment. My hands were shaking. My parents had structured their entire finances around my contributions. The fixer part of me was screaming, they're your parents, they need you. But Micah needs me more. And Micah needed a mother who doesn't let people treat him like he's invisible. So I stopped. No announcement, no letter. November mortgage help? Didn't send it. Electric bill? Not my problem. Dad's prescription rides? He'd have to figure it out. It took 11 days before Mom called. Not to apologize, of course. To ask why the electric company sent a late notice. Jolene, did you forget? This is basic responsibility. Basic responsibility. Why? For her bill. In her house. I said, I didn't forget. I'm not paying it anymore. The silence was so loud I could hear her kitchen clock. She said, after everything we've done for you? I said, what have you done for me, Mom? Name one thing in the last 5 years. She hung up. Do you think that was too harsh? I wonder sometimes. But gentle hadn't worked in a decade. Meanwhile, Bree was reporting back what they said about me when I wasn't there. Dad told her I was throwing a tantrum and I'd come crawling back by Christmas. Crawling back. Like a dog. Mom told her neighbor Linda over the back fence that I was going through something, and she was giving me space. My issues. Not the fact that she humiliated my child. Bree confronted them one November evening. Sat them down and said, do you understand why Jolene stopped helping? Mom's response? She's always been sensitive. Even as a girl, she'd cry over nothing. Over nothing. My son being told he's not worth being proud of is nothing. Bree laid it out plain. She's carried this family for years. You've never thanked her. You insulted her son. Now you're acting like she's the villain. Mom cried. Dad left the room. Nothing changed. December hit and the consequences showed up. Mortgage was tight. Dad had to beg his buddy Leonard for rides to the pharmacy because God forbid he use a rideshare app like a normal person. Mom picked up extra shifts at Kroger and complained to anyone who'd listen. According to Bree, I was now the family villain in every conversation. Then Christmas came. Bree convinced me to show up. Not for them, she said. For you. If you don't come, they keep telling people you abandoned the family. Show up head high with Micah. Annoying advice. Correct advice. Christmas Day, I put Micah in his little button-down shirt. He looked so handsome and drove over. Bree met us at the door, hugged Micah first. We walked in and Mom looked at me and said, oh, you came. Not, Merry Christmas. Just, oh, you came. Like I was a package she wasn't sure would arrive. We almost made it through dinner. Almost. Dad had been weirdly quiet all evening, watching me with this expression I couldn't read. Then as Mom cleared plates, he finally spoke. He looked at me, looked at Micah and said, you know, if you'd kept a man around, maybe you wouldn't be so bitter. Boy needs a father, not a mother with a chip on her shoulder. The room stopped. Bree put down her fork. Micah looked at me. And I looked at this man I'd driven to appointments, paid bills for, sacrificed weekends and savings for, and something white-hot went through me. I stood up and slapped him. Open palm right across the face. And then within the same second, Bree stood up and slapped him too. Same side. Like we'd rehearsed it, which we absolutely had not. Dad sat there with his mouth open, looking between us like the ghost of consequences had just shown up in stereo. Mom dropped a plate. Chattered. Nobody picked it up. I said, voice shaking, don't you ever talk about my son or my life like that again. Bree pointed at him and said, you're supposed to be a father, Richard. Act like one. Dad didn't say a word. Mom kept whispering, this is Christmas, like the calendar date should exempt everyone from accountability. Bree turned to me calmly. Get Micah's coat. Then to Mom, I'm moving out. I'm not living with people who treat their family like this. Mom said, Bree, you can't, and Bree said, watch me. She packed a bag that night and came to my apartment. Micah gave her his dinosaur blanket. The three of us ate Target Christmas cookies and barely talked, and it was the most peaceful Christmas evening I'd had in years. Now I know some of you are thinking, did she really slap her father? Yes. Am I proud of it? That's complicated. I think after years of swallowing disrespect, there comes a moment when your body acts before your brain catches up. Anne Bree did the same thing without being asked, because she'd reached the same breaking point from a different direction. But that Christmas night was not the end. Not even close. Because when both daughters walked out and the money and the help and the presents were all gone, that's when my parents had to sit in that empty house and face what they'd created. And what happened next involves a phone call from my dad at 2 a.m. and a conversation with my mom in a Kroger parking lot that made us both ugly cry in public. What they did to try to fix things, and whether I let them, that's the part of this story I've been building to. And honestly, it surprised even me. So there we were, me, Bree, and Micah in my little 2-bedroom apartment eating leftover cookies the night of Christmas, and for the first time in I don't even know how long I felt like I could breathe. No guilt. No obligation. Just quiet. Bree looked at me over her cookie and said, we should have done this years ago. And she was right. But you can't rush someone into standing up for themselves. It happens when it happens. The week between Christmas and New Year's was silent from my parents' end. No calls, no texts, nothing. And I'm not going to lie, that silence was almost harder than the fighting. Because at least when they were yelling or guilt-tripping, I knew where I stood. Silence meant they were either processing or plotting, and with Donna and Richard, it could genuinely go either way. Bree settled into my couch like she'd always lived there. She started job hunting, helped with Micah's morning routine, and honestly, she was incredible with him. She'd pick him up from aftercare when I worked late. He helped him with his reading homework. One night I came home and found them building a blanket fort in the living room, and Micah was laughing. This deep belly laugh that I hadn't heard from him in months. Bree gave him something I'd been too stretched thin to give him enough of. Just presents. Just fun. And seeing that made me realize how much of myself I'd been pouring into my parents' house instead of into my own. Then January 2nd, 2 in the morning, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer because nothing good happens at 2 a.m., right? But I saw it was Dad. And my first thought was that something medical had happened, his heart maybe, so I picked up. He wasn't having a medical emergency. He was crying. Richard, the man who I'd seen cry maybe twice in my entire life, was on the phone at 2 in the morning crying. And he said, his voice all broken up, "Jolene, the house is so quiet." I didn't say anything. I just let him talk. He said, "Your mother's been in bed for 2 days. She won't eat. The house is a mess. I tried to fix the sink and I couldn't do it. I called Leonard and he said he can't keep driving me around. I don't know what to do." And then he said the thing that cracked me open a little, even though I was trying so hard to stay strong. He said, "I'm sorry about what I said about the boy. About Micah. He's a good kid. I know he's a good kid." No. Do you think that was enough? Because I didn't. One sorry at 2 a.m. when you're desperate and your house is falling apart. Is that real remorse or is that just panic? I'd been fooled before. Every time I'd pulled back even slightly over the years, there'd be just enough sweetness to pull me back in. And then 2 weeks later we'd be right back where we started. So I said, "I hear you, Dad. But I need you to understand that sorry doesn't fix this. Not this time." He got quiet. Then he said, "What do you want me to do?" And I said, "I want you to think about that and call me back when you have a real answer." And I hung up. At 2 in the morning. My crying father. And then I lay in bed staring at the ceiling for 3 hours because of course I did. Bree was awake too. She'd heard my phone ring. She came and sat on the edge of my bed and I told her what he said. She listened, then said, "It's a start. But a start isn't a finish. Have I mentioned I love my sister? Because I really love my sister." About a week later I got a text from Mom. Not a call, a text. And it said, "Can we meet and talk? Just us. No Dad." That surprised me. Donna doesn't usually go anywhere without Richard's involvement. So I said okay and we agreed to meet at the Kroger parking lot near her house. I know that sounds ridiculous. A Kroger parking lot for a major family reconciliation moment, but she'd just gotten off a shift and I wasn't about to go inside that house. So Kroger it was. I pulled up and she was sitting in her car. I got in the passenger seat. And she looked terrible, honestly. Tired, thin, like she'd aged 5 years in 2 months. Part of me wanted to hug her immediately. The other part of me, the part that remembered, "Some grandkids just make you proud," stayed in my seat. She didn't say anything for a long minute. Then she said, "I've been a bad mother to you. Not, I'm sorry you feel that way. Not, we both made mistakes." She said, "I've been a bad mother to you." Plain. Direct. No qualifiers. I was not expecting that. I was prepared for excuses, deflection, tears used as weapons. Not a plain admission of guilt. And honestly, it hit me so hard that I started crying before I could stop myself. He started crying too. 2 grown women sobbing in a Kroger parking lot at 4:30 in the afternoon while people loaded groceries into their trunks around us. We must have been quite a sight. She told me she'd been up every night thinking about what she said at that dinner. About the look on Micah's face. She said, "I don't know why I said it. I don't know why I treat you the way I do. You've done more for us than any child should have to, and I took it for granted because it was easier than admitting I needed help." She said she was ashamed. She said Dad was ashamed too but didn't know how to say it because Richard has the emotional vocabulary of a brick wall. Her words, not mine, though I would have said the same thing. I let her talk. And then I said what I needed to say. I said, "Mom, I love you. I will always love you. But I am done being used. I am done being the family ATM who gets criticized for the color of the tiles she paid for. I am done bringing my son into a house where he feels like he doesn't matter. If you want a relationship with me and with Micah, things have to actually change. Not just words. Actions. Consistently. Over time." She nodded. She didn't argue. She didn't deflect. She just nodded and said, "Tell me what you need." And I laid it out. No more financial dependence on me. They'd need to restructure their budget, maybe downsize, whatever it took, but I was not their retirement plan. Micah would be treated with the same warmth as any other grandchild, or we wouldn't visit at all. And if Dad ever spoke to me like that again, about Troy, about me being single, about anything, it would be the last conversation we had. Period. She agreed to everything. Now agreeing is easy. Following through is the hard part. And I want to be real with you, it didn't magically get better overnight. There were setbacks. There were awkward dinners where Mom would catch herself mid-sentence about to say something critical, and you could see her physically stop and redirect. Dad was harder. Richard doesn't bend easily. But he started trying in his own clumsy way. He called Micah on his birthday in February. First time he'd done that without me reminding him. He asked Micah about school, about what he was reading. It was stiff and awkward and lasted maybe 4 minutes, but Micah hung up smiling. And that mattered more to me than any apology. Bree stayed with me through February. She got a new job in March, operations manager at a distribution center right outside Dayton, which meant she was staying local. She got her own apartment, but she's 10 minutes away, and she comes over for dinner twice a week. She became the aunt Micah didn't know he needed. And she also became the buffer between me and my parents when things got tense, which they still did sometimes. By spring things had shifted. Not perfectly, I want to be clear about that. My parents are not suddenly different people. Dad still grumbles. Mom still has moments where she says something thoughtless and then catches herself. But they lost both their daughters in one night, and the house went from full to empty, and the bills started piling up, and they had to face the reality that they had driven away the people who loved them most. That's a hard lesson. And I hope, it's one that's sticking. Last month I brought Micah over for Sunday dinner. First time in a while. Mom made pot roast, which, yes, I noticed, the same meal I'd made the night everything blew up. I think it was her way of saying something without saying it. Dad pulled Micah aside after dinner and showed him how to change a tire in the garage. They were out there for almost an hour. When they came back in, Micah had grease on his shirt and the biggest grin on his face, and Dad looked at me and said, "Smart kid you've got." 4 words. But from Richard? That was a whole speech. I'm not going to stand here and tell you everything is perfect now. It's not. My parents still have a long way to go, and honestly so do I. I'm learning how to have boundaries without guilt. I'm learning that loving someone doesn't mean letting them drain you. I'm learning that being kind isn't the same as being a doormat, and that my son is watching everything I do, so I'd better show him what self-respect looks like. Bree told me the other day, you know what the moral of this is? Sometimes you have to let people miss you before they appreciate you. And I think she's right. My parents didn't value what I gave them until it was gone. They didn't see Micah until they almost lost the chance to know him. And they didn't understand how badly they'd treated me until both their daughters walked out on Christmas Day and the house went dark. So if you're out there right now being the one who gives and gives and gives and never gets anything back, if you're the one paying the bills and cooking the meals and showing up every time and being told it's not enough, I want you to hear this from me. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to say, no more. It doesn't make you selfish. It doesn't make you a bad daughter or a bad son. It makes you someone who finally decided to treat yourself the way you've been treating everyone else. And the people who love you for real, they'll come around. It might take a slap or two, I'm half kidding, but they'll come around. And if they don't, at least you'll know where you stand. Mike is doing great, by the way. He's reading 2 grade levels ahead, and he told me last week that he wants to be an engineer. I said, baby, you can be anything. And I meant it. Because that boy is perfect. And everyone in his life is going to know it from now on. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, I'd really love it if you hit that like button. It means more than you know. And if there was something you didn't agree with or something you would have done differently, drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your thoughts, because every time someone shares their perspective, it helps someone else going through something similar feel a little less alone. You all are amazing for being here, and I appreciate every single one of you. Take care of yourselves, okay?